Dash Delay, welcome to Tibet This Week, a weekly news edition on Tibet, His Holiness the Dalai Lama and the Central Tibetan Administration. Let us look at today's headlines. His Holiness the Dalai Lama graces the Summit on Leadership and Happiness. Sikyong Penpa testifies at U.S. Congressional-Executive Commission on China's hearing on Tibet. United Nations member states raise concern over human rights violation by China in Tibet. Kalon Norzin meets Taiwan's foreign minister, legislators and media. Fifth session of the Tibetan Parliament-in-Exile adjourns. Sydney holds a conference of Tibetan Buddhist centers in Australia. New Delhi hosts first Ravi Ray Memorial Lecture and Ravi Ray Award Ceremony. On Thursday last week, His Holiness the Dalai Lama presided over a two-day summit on leadership and happiness organized by the Harvard University Kennedy School's Center for Public Leadership at his residence in Dharamshala. The interactive summit was moderated by Arthur Brooks, Harvard University professor of the practice of public leadership, and Jeffrey Goldberg, editor-in-chief of the Atlantic online magazine and publisher.
The most joyful opportunity that we could find, which paradoxically is to learn and grow from our suffering. Life has a lot of suffering. The first noble truth of Buddhism is that life is suffering or dissatisfaction. Only in embracing and accepting our suffering will we understand that it is sacred. And in so doing, we can connect ourselves to others, to find our meaning in life, to create a sense of contentment, and to be less self-centered.
The Leadership and Happiness Laboratory project started at the Harvard University Kennedy School Center for Public Leadership conducts integrative research and creates educational resources or tools for leaders in all sectors to learn the science of happiness, apply it in their own lives, and share it with others. Sikyong Penpa of the Central Tibetan Administration testified at the U.S. Congressional-Executive Commission on China's hearing on preserving Tibet, combating cultural erasure, forced assimilation and transnational repression on Tuesday this week. Apart from Sikyong, the witnesses on Tuesday's hearing include Richard Gere, chairman of International Campaign for Tibet, Harden Tedong, director of Tibet Action Institute, and Tenzin Dorji, senior researcher, strategist at Tibet Action Institute.
If PRC is not made to reverse, to change its current policies, Tibet and Tibetans will definitely die a slow death.
13 years have passed since the last Sino-Tibetan dialogue, although the U.S. routinely calls for the resumption of dialogue. In fact, it's by law of the land now that it has to be called for. The Tibet Policy Act of 2002 requires that.
But after using countless strategies, resources, and unimaginable violence, Xi Jinping now believes the best way for China to conquer Tibet is to kill the Tibetan in the child. He's doing this by taking nearly all Tibetan children away from their families and from the people who will surely transmit this identity to them, not just their parents, but their spiritual leaders and their teachers. And he's handing them over to agents of the Chinese state to raise them to speak a new language, practice a new culture and religion, that of the Chinese Communist Party.
One strategy that Beijing employs with devastating effectiveness is the relationship mapping that links individuals in the diaspora to their families in Tibet. This mapping of family connections allows Chinese authorities to use the fate of relatives back home in Tibet as a pawn to blackmail exiled Tibetans into silence.
The testimonials of the four witnesses essentially stress the new and worsening challenges faced by Tibetans in Tibet as Beijing implements new intensified repressive measures. The commission headed by Chairman Smith and Chairman Merkley examined the unprecedented linguistic, religious and human rights repression in Tibet and transnational repression faced by Tibetans abroad. Also at the hearing, U.S. Special Coordinator for Tibetan Issue, Azra Zia, delivered a video message raising concerns over the Communist Party of China's continued repression inside Tibet, such as the enforcement of colonial-style boarding school system and involuntary mass DNA collection campaigns endangering the unique Tibetan identity. After scrutinizing the details of the testimonies, the Commission will identify diplomatic and policy options for the United States and other like-minded countries to help preserve Tibetan cultural heritage, as well as explore measures to defend against threats and intimidation targeting Tibetans in the United States and around the world. The United Nations member states raised concern over systematic violations of human rights by China, including in Tibet, in the ongoing 52nd United Nations Human Rights Council session, which is currently underway in Geneva, Switzerland. Underscoring grave human rights situation in China and regions under its control, such as Tibet, distinguished representatives from Australia, Belgium, Czech Republic, Denmark, European Union, Finland, Germany, Iceland, Japan, Lithuania, Norway, Switzerland, Sweden, United Kingdom and United States of America deplored continued violations of human rights by China. The member states called China to abide by its obligations under international human rights law. The representatives expressed deep concerns over erosion of educational, religious, cultural and linguistic rights and freedoms in Tibet, with matters of compulsory boarding schools and DNA sampling in Tibet, and call for release of all human rights defenders arbitrarily detained, particularly in Tibet. In his maiden oral update of activities of the Office of High Commissioner for Human Rights, the High Commissioner Volker Turk announced, with regard to China, the office has opened channels of communication with a range of actors to follow up on a variety of human rights issues, including protection of Tibetans, Uyghurs and other groups. The ongoing United Nations Human Rights Council 52nd session commenced from 27 February and will be concluded on 4th April 2023. The delegation of CTA's Department of Information and International Relations, headed by Kalon Dolma, arrived in Taiwan on Monday this week. Kalon was accompanied by DIR Secretary Kamachuing on this week-long visit to strengthen ties with Taiwan and discuss future collaborations with the Taiwanese Parliamentary Group for Tibet and meet with the representatives of the Tibet support groups and civil society groups. The Office of Tibet in Taiwan, led by Representative Bawa Kesa Genze, received the DIR delegation and attended a dinner gathering hosted by the Taiwanese Parliamentary Delegation Group for Tibet, attended by the prominent political figures who are staunch Tibet supporters like Norzin, Minister of Hakka Affairs Council, Ye Chulen, Secretary General to President, Liu Ten Chuchen, member of the Control Yuan Taiwan ROC, and former MP Jie Ru Chen. On Tuesday this week, Kalon Dolma with Secretary Kamachuing met with Taiwan's Minister of Foreign Affairs, Josiah Joseph Wu, where Kalon apprised the Minister of Foreign Affairs of the CCP's ongoing policy of eradicating Tibetan religion, culture, language and Tibetan identity. She further briefed on the global situation and how Taiwan and Tibet, as target of CCP's aggression and intimidation, must unitedly face the challenge of China. During the interaction, Kalon raised the subject of visa-related problems faced by the Tibetan Buddhist monks and Tibetans studying in Taiwan and sought the ministry's attention and support on the same. Kalon and the Secretary also paid a courtesy call on Yu Si-kun, President of the Legislative Yuan, Freddie Lim, Chair of the Taiwanese Parliamentary Group for Tibet, Legislature Sun Han Hong, and Wang Ting-yu, President of National Human Rights Commission of Taiwan, on Wednesday this week. During the hour-long meeting, the Office of the President of the Legislative Yuan organized a press conference where Kalon Dolma was officially welcomed. Addressing the congregation of Taiwanese media, Kalon Dolma expressed her appreciation for the exemplary image of the Taiwan as a free democratic country whose citizens are known for their kindness, and said she was pleased that Taiwan had become the country of her maiden official visit to Asian neighbors. Kalon highlighted the critical and deteriorating situation in Tibet that has been driving Tibetans in Tibet from all walks of life to self-immolate in protest against the repressive policies of the Chinese government that aim to erase Tibetan language, identity and culture. While noting the current stalemate in the Sino-Tibet dialogue due to China's unwillingness to resume the dialogue, Kalon reiterated Central Tibetan administration's firm commitment to resolving the conflict through peaceful negotiation based on the middle way approach. The fifth session of the budget session of the 17th Tibetan Parliament-in-Exile concluded last Saturday. The speaker, in his conclusion speech, appealed to the Tibetans for a consolidated effort to further the common cause of Tibet and to abstain from the afflictions of regionalism. Around 100 representatives, teachers and practitioners from various Tibetan Buddhist centers in Australia participated in the Conference of Tibetan Buddhist Centers held on 26 March at Aerial Function Centre, University of Technology, Sydney. The conference, first of its kind held in Australia, was organised by the Tibet Information Office, Canberra, with an aim to bring together Tibetan Buddhist centres, teachers and practitioners in Australia to discuss the universal teachings of Tibetan Buddhism and His Holiness the Dalai Lama and their significance to the contemporary world, and to provide an opportunity to learn and share from each other's experiences. His Holiness the Dalai Lama sent a message on the occasion expressing appreciation for hosting such a conference and made an appeal for an earnest endeavours to create a genuinely peaceful world free of weapons and violent conflict. Sikyong Penpa Tsering, in his greetings to the conference via video message, where he emphasized the importance of 4 principal commitments and social, emotional and ethical learning ideas of His Holiness the Dalai Lama, and suggested that Tibetan Buddhist centers in Australia could take an initiative in introducing sea learning curriculum in Australian schools by contacting local and state administrations. The member of the Tibetan Parliament-in-Exile for Australia-Asia, Tenzin Phintso Doreng, and Australian Senator Janet Wright sent their greetings through video message. At the conference, Representative Kama Sengye highlighted the risks faced by the Tibetan Buddhism's future in Tibet, with the atheist Chinese governments gearing up to increase their control over Tibetan Buddhism. The chief guest of the opening ceremony, Gavin Powell Davies, chair of the Federation of the Australian Buddhist Councils and Buddhist Council of NSW, showed his concern over the lack of freedom in Tibet, especially freedom of religion. Geshe Lobsang Goga, a resident Lama of Tara Institute, and Kinzom Dongdu, a former member of the Tibetan Parliament-in-Exile, were other special guests on the occasion. India-Tibet Friendship Society, in collaboration with Lohai Academy, Bhubaneswar, Odisha, organized the first Ravi Ray Memorial Lecture and Ravi Ray Award ceremony in New Delhi on Sunday last week. Shri Prafulla Samantre, trustee, Lohai Academy, Bhubaneswar, who is also a noted environmentalist and a senior member of the ITFS, chaired the first Rabi Ray Memorial Lecture. Dr. Anand Kumar, president of the India-Tibet Friendship Society, gave the introduction, perspective and context of the lecture, highlighting the significance of the late Rabi Ray's life and his contribution together with the role in Tibetan freedom movement. The keynote speaker for the occasion was Professor Shrikant Kontapalli, Dean, School of International Studies, JNU, who spoke on the insights of Tibet in India-China relations. He shared the recent developments in regard to the Tibet issue and India's approach in regard to Tibet. Dr. Madhuri Sondi, longtime Tibet supporter and wife of late Dr. M.L. Sondi, also an ardent Tibet supporter, was presented the Rabi Ray Award for her and her late husband's contribution towards the Tibetan cause. Tibetan representatives from India-Tibet Coordination Office, New Delhi, and Sameling Tibetan Settlement, Majduka Tila, were also in attendance. Rabi Ray was an ardent Tibet supporter and a prominent Indian politician. He was the president of the India-Tibet Friendship Society since 1997 till his passing away in 2017. That is all for this week's news edition on Tibet This Week. Thank you for watching Tibet TV.